Hi, welcome to the Online Jewelry Academy. I'm Professor John R. and I'm your instructor. In this video, I'm going to show you how I created this spiral pendant. It's really easy and fun to make. Now, I used the same technique to enhance some other projects we've shown you in the past. For example, I used the forged linked bracelet technique to create this interesting pendant. I enhanced a project I showed in my shell forming video to create the fecund form. And I was inspired by our fibula video to make this interesting piece. But in this video, I'm going to show you how to make this spiral pendant and enhance it with epoxy resin. I started with about 12 inches of 16 gauge round copper grounding wire that was well annealed. I used the rolling mill to progressively thin and flatten the wire, thinning what will be the top at a shorter distance and thinning what will be the bulk of the piece at a longer distance. After the rolling mill, I re-annealed it and using my round nose pliers, I made a big spiral loop on one end. This first loop is going to be where it attaches to the necklace. To make the main spiral part, I began on the other end and holding it really tight, I made a slight curve. Then I moved the pliers slightly and holding the pliers in place, I moved the other end of the wire with my hand. Sometimes this takes a little playing with, but what I'm trying to do is to carefully watch the distance between one part of the line to the other. So as I worked the loop up to the top, I repositioned my pliers and was very careful to maintain that distance. Once again, it takes a little bit of patience to carefully manipulate the wire, but if you do it carefully, you'll end up with a nice spiral. You might notice at the top I made sure to close the spiral form. This is so that the epoxy won't leak out of the top. Then I put some adhesive tape on one side and really burnished the tape to the piece so that it made a tight seal. I wanted it to be completely sealed. Then I bent the ends of the tape over so I could move the piece around without my fingers sticking to the tape. For this project, I used colored chalk pastels to create the color for the clear epoxy. I just rubbed some of the pastel onto a paper until I had a little pile. Then I poured out just a small amount of the two-part epoxy. I used DevCon epoxy, which you can buy online, and I put a link for it in the description of this video. Another popular product is called ice resin, which I've used in other projects. Using a toothpick, I mixed the two parts well, being careful not to introduce any bubbles. And then I added some of the color. The chalk actually creates the color in the same way that microbeads would. The particulates are just so small that you really can't see them with the naked eye, and the epoxy has the appearance of being a uniform color. To maximize the potential for the epoxy resin to be its hardest, it's best to mix on plastic using plastic tools, and we have a video on that too. Then I just loaded up my mixing toothpick with a bunch of the epoxy and carefully placed it in the spiral opening of the pendant. I'm going to put 2 layers of epoxy. This is just my background layer. I dropped the epoxy in and kind of dragged it into place. I do this slowly and very carefully to ensure that I fill the voids and don't leave any air bubbles. I just repeat this basic step over and over again until I finish. Then I gave it some time to set. Check with the instructions on your epoxy for setting times. After my first layer, I dropped broken eggshell in, which became my inclusions. I didn't have to use any inclusions, and I could have done this faster just by filling it in completely with the epoxy. And eggshells aren't the only kind of inclusion I could have used. There are all kinds of things that I could have used. But I just happen to like inclusions in this piece. Once you have all of your inclusions where you want them, you just repeat the mixing steps. This time I used a popsicle stick to mix them and then used it to move more epoxy into the piece. Basically, I'm just going to cover the whole piece with a thin coat. While it was still fluid, I moved around some of the inclusions and popped any air bubbles I saw. Once you let it set, you have a beautiful piece like this. If you're interested in this topic, I have a number of free videos listed under the category of plastic/acrylic projects on our website at onlinejewelryacademy.com. I hope you liked this video. If you're interested in learning more about the tools and the various processes I've performed here, I have a much more detailed video on this project entitled Copper and Epoxy Spiral Pendant, and I put a link for that in the description below. I also have over 300 free instructional videos covering a wide variety of topics and projects, and I also have 3 paid classes on udemy.com. I have a basic beginning jewelry class called Colorful Silver Jewelry, in which I provide detailed instruction on epoxy, one on setting all kinds of different stones, and one demonstrating how to make a beautiful hinged bracelet. You can find discount codes in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button so you don't miss our future releases. Thanks for watching.